All right, let's pray, shall we? Father, again, we do thank you for the privilege of coming and studying truth, and we ask that you would, by your Spirit, help us to hear what you have to say, especially in a topic that is very challenging for sure, and something that affects all of us if we live in this world. And we ask that you would bless this time in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, we are going to, Lord willing, finish letter 5 today of the Screwtape letters. And we're going to kind of get more into the big theme, which is really the idea of suffering and its various forms. So, I don't want to spend too much time because we have a lot to do. So let's jump in at paragraph 2. And if you did print the one that I had sent you, which is you're a good student, it's going to be a little different than the one that I have now because somehow the paragraphs got numbered wrong. So if I say paragraph in the book, there's only 3 paragraphs. So if you printed the one I gave you, it says there's 5 in there. How that worked? So you might be wondering, when is he going to get to paragraph 5? But I'm in paragraph 3. So, but if you see it over there, it works. And there's an extra one here. So we are going to start in the real paragraph 2, which talks about the war. Remember, C.S. Lewis is writing right at the beginning of World War II. And so Wormwood has gotten excited that the war has started. And he thinks that because of all the suffering that has gone on, or that is going to go on with the war, that it's such a great thing. And the wise Screwtape says, hey, you got to be careful. And so that's where we're at. So let's jump to paragraph 2. He says, of course, a war is entertaining. The immediate fear and suffering of the humans is a legitimate and pleasing refreshment for our myriads of toiling workers. But what permanent good does it do unless we make use of it for bringing souls to our Father below? So, to me, that sentence there is really one of the, again, it's one of these themes that keeps coming up as relates to themes of the whole letter, is what good is it, from Screwtape's perspective, unless they use it to undermine faith, we talked about that last time, or to bring souls to their Father below. He says, when I see the temporal suffering of humans who finally escape us, I feel as if I had been allowed to taste the first course of a rich banquet and then denied the rest. It is worse than not to have tasted it at all. The enemy, true to his barbarous methods of warfare, allows us to see the short misery of his favorites only to tantalize and torment us, to mock the incessant hunger which, during this present phase of the great conflict, his blockade is admittedly imposing. Let us therefore think rather how to use, there it is again, than how to enjoy this European war. So, before we move on, let's go into some of these questions here because, so question 6, and we'll look at some of these verses I think because it'll be helpful. What does it mean when Screwtape mentions the barbarous methods of his enemy in allowing misery to his favorites? Now, think about that for a minute. What are the barbarous methods as it relates to suffering?
Well, a barb is to hook something to keep it from coming back out.
Think of like a barbarian, which would fit with that.
So the entries and the deaths and
well,
the things that
he says right on the top of the second page there, the enemy, true to his uncivilized, crude, savage methods of warfare, allows us to see the short misery of his favorites only to tantalize and torment us. So think about it. You have God up here and you have Screwtape watching. Why would Screwtape... Well, first of all, what are the methods? That's probably the better question, and we'll see how there's...
Suffering.
Suffering.
All kinds of different kinds.
All kinds of suffering. To who?
Us. His favorites.
You think about suffering, and a lot of times, I'll ask the question, who wants to sign up to be one of God's favorites?
Yeah.
I mean, really, I'm not that bold. I'm not that brave in that sense.
Is he saying, is it because of the suffering and the things that they saw in the hunger and everything you see, which came along with World War II, is it because it unified?
Say that again, because of what?
Because it unified people? It definitely unified the churches.
I think what he's doing is he's stepping back for a moment. And what Screwtape is doing is, the war is just one example of God's methods from all the time. And for them, it's cruel and savage, because from Screwtape's perspective, he gets to see the suffering of a saint, so to speak, one of God's kids, and he sees and he enjoys that because they're cruel. But on the other hand, it stings him. It's cruel because he realizes this, even though we get to enjoy it for the moment,
It's not the full cup.
it's not the full cup. It's actually producing something else.
Right.
What is it producing?
Mortality.
No, drawing closer to God.
Okay, closer to God, steadfastness, what are you going to say?
Closer to God.
Closer to God?
Yeah.
Foxhole confessions.
Yes, it can do that too.
Yeah. Perseverance.
Compassion for other
No
people.
atheists in foxhole.
No?
No. So, perseverance in our
So,
faith.
think about, somebody read, if you can, let's read some verses. I got some verses here on the sheet. Let's read, who wants to read? Put your hand up and I'll assign you something. Okay, Jan, why don't you read Hebrews 11, 35 to 39. Who else wants to read? Jan, what's that?
Because I don't have Isaiah.
Yeah, don't have Isaiah,
I
sorry.
didn't copy that one out.
Who else wants to read something? Okay, read Luke 11, 49, and then over here read, Bill read 750 through 55, Acts. So what does the Hebrew passage say?
I know they have
11,
women received.
yes!
Okay.
Let's try that. Sounds
They're
right.
dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised.
So, this is from Hebrews 11, known as the Hall of Faith, right? So here's a great example. If you made it into the Hall of Faith, you did well. And you're one of God's favorites, so to speak. But here we have this passage that is pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
Sawn in two?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so imagine Screwtape watching this, but realizing that the temporary joy that he would have in seeing somebody suffer, when in reality, God was producing something even bigger and more eternal.
It actually does two things though. Not only is Screwtape watching, getting the enjoyment from the suffering, but realizing it's temporary, he himself and the other demons are being tormented also to gnash their teeth because they're not able to enjoy further than what's God is accomplishing.
Yep, because somebody read Romans 5. This is an extra verse if you want. Who wants to read? Carol, you got it?
Not yet.
Well, read Romans 5, 3 through 5. Let's read that. Or 3 and 4 at least. Read it real loud so that we can get it on the camera
Okay,
here.
5, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. Now hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Lord, who was given to us.
So imagine they bring Screwtape, if he can. He's going to bring, well, maybe Wormwood would because he's unwise. Okay, he's learning. Wormwood's going to bring a whole bunch of tribulation. He's going to be excited about it. And Screwtape says, you know what? You know what you're doing? God's there, and your tribulation is producing character in this guy, or patience. Tribulation produces perseverance or long suffering. He says, you got to be careful on this, yes. if you just get too excited, remember, God is always using that wickedness or that evil in this world to produce something good. And, you know, perseverance to character and character hope. And this is what I think is interesting in that, think about this for a minute. Step back for a moment in the big picture of good and evil. Okay? Now, I don't want to get too philosophical because there's going to be a lot of disagreement here, okay? But does God, who knows all, right? God knows everything, right?
Right.
And from the beginning?
Yes.
Okay, He's perfect in wisdom?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I want you to go back, let's venture back before the world was. Before the angels even. Just God. Father, Son, and Spirit, hanging out, chilling, loving each other. And they decide, you know what? Let's make a world. Let's create a world. What kind of world could they create? Infinite, right? They can create. This is when you get into philosophy, okay? When I took this in philosophy, it was fun, okay? Infinite amount of worlds. But God says, well, I have an agenda. I have a point that I want to get. So here's the question that's asked in philosophy. With all the possible worlds that God has created, and this experiment, if you want to say it that way, is not complete yet, okay? We're still in the middle of it, okay? But for what God was planning to do and what His goal was, is this the perfect world?
Well, for
His
For
purpose.
His purposes.
For his
We have to say yes.
Yeah.
God has no plan B.
No. No.
Does God have a plan B?
This is His plan.
Yeah.
This is His plan right here. This is plan A
That's right.
for His purposes. Now again, we get into, oh, well wait, God is ordaining evil. No, we're not saying that. But God, in a certain sense, or God causes evil, I'll say that. In a certain sense, God has ordained evil to be. So when He looks at this world, He says, you know what? He acknowledges, I'm going to create a world where I'm going to give man choice. You know, and He knows the choice. Okay? Doesn't take that away. But even in the midst of that choice, God could have created man to never fall, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay? He's infinite. He can do whatever He wants. But He creates this world and says, it's going to accomplish what I want. And I'm going to allow evil in this world for a short period of time. It's not eternity. Right? There's going to be new heavens and new earth. We learned about it in VBS this week. And it's all that started out well, it has become corrupted. And at the end, it's going to all be made right for eternity. And God is going to be glorified through all of it. But the thing is that right now, the world that we are in is plan A. With the purposes that He has in mind. So God's perfect world, all the way from beginning to His perfect plan, I'll say it that way, involves evil.
well, it has to.
It has to.
Yeah, that's
Otherwise, we have a God that is reacting.
We don't have like a frame of reference to see the glory of God too, because it's equals the opposite of that. It's confusion. It's
Yep.
everything that's wrong.
God certainly could have created a world that never had evil in it.
Right.
You know, for sure.
What appreciation would you have of God?
What appreciation would you have?
Yeah.
So imagine for a minute, you have, I like to ask this question, what is the character of God? According to Exodus 34, 6 and 7, when Moses shows up, God says, I'm God, I'm merciful, I'm compassionate, I'm gracious, I'm forgiving to the generations. I will not declare the guilty, I will not let the guilty go unpunished. So you have holiness, righteousness, compassion, mercy, all the character of God that we have. So when you go to Michael the archangel and you say, hey Michael, what does it feel like to experience the mercy of God? What does Michael the archangel say to you?
Doesn't know.
He's never experienced.
He says, I have no idea.
no.
Never experienced that.
No, no.
He said, I can tell you. I've experienced God's mercy. Michael, what does it feel like to experience God's forgiveness? I don't know.
Doesn't know.
So what you have is God. Now imagine you have Michael and his perfect holy world, right? In the sense of who he is. He can never see, he can see, but he can never experience certain perspectives of who God is because he's never needed it. Therefore, however, in order for God's majesty, for him to be glorified in his mercy, in his forgiveness, what's required?
Our fault.
Suffering, fall,
Sin. Now imagine, again, before the perfect world, part of who God is, his attributes, could never be fully understood or exposed or expressed, or could he be glorified if
If there was no sin.
there was no sin.
So what about Lucifer though? Lucifer never experienced any of it, so like he like, you know, you ever thought about that? Like,
In what sense?
he just decided in his own mind and free will. Did Michael ever have these thoughts to be like, hey, I'm gonna overthrow God?
Well, I think that the angels, this is what we do know. Theologians will talk about this various thing. They'll say, all the angels were created with a will, with the ability to choose. Satan fell, and actually in Ezekiel 28, it's a really strange Hebrew word. It says, by the abundance of your trafficking,
You gotta look into
your
the
merchandising. And the Hebrew is that Satan went around selling something. What was he selling?
Greek music, and
Rebellion.
ideas.
Rebellion, yeah.
And a third of the angels, go to Revelation 12, if you can take that image, a third of the stars came down. If that's true, then a third of the angels fell. Michael and those guys chose not to fall, and they chose to remain faithful. And then Satan, of course, is never going to be redeemed, nor can he. But in 1 Timothy chapter 5, we have this reference to the elect angels. Angels are elect, chosen before the foundation of the world, just like we are. So God was able to make sure, just like us, if he's going to redeem out of people, the elect, he had certain angels that he chose also that were not going to fall. However that all worked, we have very little information. But this is what we know. God has allowed evil in this world, and he also has allowed suffering. And he's going to use that suffering and that evil to produce something good, like tribulation produces patience or endurance. So here, Screwtape has good theology here, because he's wiser than Wormwood, and saying, you're missing it. You're getting so caught up in the suffering that you're not realizing that God is cruel and savage, because just when we get excited about the evil, God turns around and gives them more patience. God is faithful to them in the suffering, which is producing these various virtues. Because what did we see in paragraph 1? The undermining of virtues is one of their things. And so, now, again, let's step back for a minute. Think about it from the prosperity gospel message that says God would never, not just allow suffering, because they say God allows, God would never bring suffering into your life. Because suffering is always evil, it's from the devil. There's no doubt that God uses Satan for a lot of things. Satan is a servant.
He's like
all over the place.
He's like a servant in like the craziest way too.
In the craziest way. You think he's smarter.
Yes.
But he's so filled with hatred that he can't help himself.
You know what the elite believe about Satan? Like the elite Masons and stuff, they're told that the true and living God is like a vindictive God.
Yeah, they turn it around.
That hid knowledge from human beings, and that when Satan in the Garden of Eden tempted Eve, that he was actually liberating
Of
mankind.
course. Sounds like Genesis 3.
And it's like, I don't know, like, it's really a weird thing
It can be
to think
very
about.
tempting. But this is where faith comes in the sense of if Satan comes and says, hey, God's withholding this from you. You could say, well, maybe he is, but I trust he has a good reason.
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't want to hear that.
No.
Because we acknowledge that God hasn't revealed everything, right? Proverbs 25, it's God's glory to conceal it, it's to a king to search it out. And Deuteronomy 29 says the same thing, that God has revealed certain things to us, other things he's kept back for himself, maybe for the end, maybe for when we get to eternity, we'll continually be growing. So, somebody had Luke 11.
Yeah.
Read it real loud.
49. Because of this, God, in his wisdom, said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill, and others they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible.
That was the generation of 70 AD, and they were judged for it. In Acts chapter 7, we won't go there because we don't have time, but the thing is God's favorites, even as prophets, even us as saints, are not immune. to not only the fallenness of this world, that just is what it is, but we're also not immune for God allowing suffering in our life or possibly even ordaining it. The thing is, what we don't want to do is say, well, God, well, let's say it this way. If something bad happens that comes into our life, the first question I always ask is, because I was a troublemaker as a kid, what did I do? What did I do? Hebrews 12, is God disciplining me? There's a certain level of humility that's required to go, oh man, let me check. But if I go in and I go, you know, Lord, I don't see any really secret sin that I'm doing. I'm a sinner, but there's nothing that I'm really secret sinning here. Maybe it's not discipline. All suffering is not discipline. Okay? So then I cross that off, and then I come and say, well, God has a reason. He wants me to learn from this. He wants me to grow from it. He wants me let's be blunt. If suffering is good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for his followers.
Amen.
So Colossians speaks about us partaking, or actually what it says is filling up
Give me your phone.
the measure.
Okay. I'll have it after class.
It says we fill up the measure of Christ's suffering. You think, well, what does that mean? Because Jesus was hated for no reason. He suffered in this world. He's not of this world, nor are we of this world. Therefore, when he left, he said, hey, if they hated me, they're going to hate you. Therefore, as you are my representatives, remember when Saul was persecuting the church? Jesus shows up and says, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Every time the church suffers for any reason, under any circumstances, we are filling up that measure of Christ. Jesus is also suffering through us. And it, again, is glorifying God. So, when we stand back and we look, okay, God's favorites suffer. And it's barbarous, however you want to say it, because they think, they're still growing from this. So, question 6b, what do you think is the enemy's blockade? How does the war have certain tendencies that are not in Screwtape's favor? So let's continue on. The war has certain tendencies. Paragraph 2 there, 4th line down. Let's think how to use, not how to enjoy the European war. For it has certain tendencies inherent in it which are in themselves by no means in our favor. We may hope for a good deal of cruelty and unchastity. But if we are not careful, we shall see thousands turning in this tribulation to the enemy. While tens of thousands who do not go as far as that will nevertheless have their attention diverted from themselves to values and causes which they believe to be higher than the self.
Amen.
I know that the enemy disapproves many of these causes, but that is where he is so unfair. Cry me a river. Okay? He often makes prizes of humans who have given their lives for causes he thinks bad on the monstrously sophistical ground that the humans thought them good and were following the best that they knew. Consider too what undesirable deaths occur in wartime. Men are killed in places where they knew they might be killed and to which they go, if they are at all of the enemy's party prepared. How much better for us if all humans, okay, we'll get to that in a minute. We talked a little bit about that. But let's see if he goes, he mentions in here about, there it is, 3rd line down. He allows us to see the short misery of his favorites and to tantalize and torment us, to mock the incessant hunger which, during this present phase of the great conflict, his blockade is admittedly imposing. So, question 6b, what is the enemy's, or in this case, God, what's the enemy's blockade? What's God's blockade? What does he mean there? I have some references to Job 1 and 2, where Satan is speaking to God, and God has brought up his great servant Job, and he says, well, of course he serves you, because you have put a hedge of protection around him. And then in Luke 22:31, this is another good passage, where they're getting ready Jesus is getting ready right at the end. He's going to the cross. And he says to Peter, Satan has asked for you. Oh man, that's scary. Satan has asked for you. And then it's actually, and then he goes on, to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you all in the Greek. So so you get this idea that Satan has asked for the 12. Or the 11 at least. He says, but I prayed for you. So, what does this tell us about Satan's ability or Satan's power?
Limited.
Limited.
Very limited.
Extremely limited. He had to ask.
Yes.
Isn't that great?
I think he also has
I
to tell
love
the
that,
truth while lying. Like, that's the way I figured it all out was he, like, in little ways will tell you the truth. Like, the
Oh,
whole...
he'll tell you partial truth, yeah.
Yeah, but you can identify that, like, with discernment, you know?
So, again, let's step back for a moment. Satan has asked for you. Jesus says, but I prayed for you. Okay? Trouble comes. So, we can blame Satan, so to speak, but who's also involved? God is.
Yeah.
He's granted permission.
Right.
See, that to me, but why is that positive? Well, first of all, what encouragement can you get from that?
If you're allowed to suffer, it's going to turn your heart toward God if you're of that mindset, and you'll become solidly founded in trusting God for everything and not questioning what's happening so much. It's like, okay, like what you said, what did I do? Is there something I'm supposed to learn from that? I learned that early on.
That's always the question.
And
something to learn.
If I'm supposed to learn something, or is it supposed to bless somebody in another way? And so it's just, it does that.
So
It does a positive thing.
let's step back. The book of Job is so theologically rich. I mean, if we didn't have it in the Bible, we would be losing so much.
Right.
Especially the first couple chapters and the last two. But so when that whole interchange happens, and God says, "Fine, Satan, just don't touch his person."
Right.
So he goes out, creates a storm, kills all the kids, takes away all his sheep, all his livestock. Did God take away the livestock?
He allowed it.
He allowed it, but he didn't do it.
Right.
Okay, so imagine, a hurricane comes and destroys your house or whatever, and God allows the hurricane to be because Satan wants to throw the hurricane and cause trouble.
Right.
God allowed it, but didn't cause it.
Right.
So we recognize that God is sovereign over it, but doesn't necessarily, he's not the agent
Right.
that does it. So does that help us? Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes the pain, the hurt says, why did you even allow it, God?
Yeah.
You could have said no.
When's this pain going to stop?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but we're operating through the pain,
Yeah.
which is completely understandable, and we can get mad at God, and God says, I know, I understand, this hurts.
And he keeps saying, I won't tempt you, or I won't cause you grief beyond what
But
you
you're
can,
able.
what you can
Bear.
Which you're able to bear.
Stand.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians
You know?
13.
Yeah.
Bob?
Jennifer called up yesterday, and I met a homeless person that she was ministering to and had a chat with them. 2-3 years ago, a drunk driver killed his wife and 3 children, and he's mad at God. And his first question is, why is he punishing me? I haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
I quickly laid out that we're all sinners, deserve
Yep.
the fires of hell. He had a Baptist background from Texas. He understood that. And he said, well, why is he punishing me? I said, well, there's no wrath left on you if God died for you. If you're a true believer, there's no wrath left over. Then I went on to say, if it's a discipline, he wants you to realize something because he loved you and he's his child. This was really thin, dicey
It is hard.
territory to talk
Yeah.
to someone about. But in regards to how God works, right? In one sense, Screwtape is celebrating that, oh, it's so great because of this short time suffering that they get to do. On the flip side of that, when we're doing evangelism, if we only improve this man's life on the way to hell, we get a little buzz out of, oh, we helped this person, that was awesome to show generosity and love. But what has to happen in these encounters, you have to understand there's a crossroad. When you meet someone in a storm, in their life, there's a crossroad. And it's that opportunity to not be like Job's friend and figure it all out. With great grace and mercy, you walk through and try to talk through some biblical principles and point them to do it themselves. Because we certainly aren't that smart. So it's amazing how just the other side of this crossroad, we can be used of God to love these people.
That's it. The ministry. Anything you've come through can become ministry to other people. And that's what, you know, that's where I've been with having lost my children to their father and so on and so forth. So
Well, I was going to say, even when it's invisible to us, one thing that's obvious is God is always involved. Always.
Always involved.
Always.
I think like a big part of it is just getting you away from flesh consciousness and
Sure.
being in your flesh. And I mean, flesh consciousness is like any moment in your life where you're focused on what's happening in the world or your desires in this world or anything like that. So
And there,
crazy things happen.
And there's wisdom here for us who are growing and spiritually, hopefully growing towards spiritual maturity. In that, I've shared this before, that when I was in Illinois, the secretary of the church, her son committed suicide, and 21 years old, terrible. And so I went over there, and we're just kind of sitting there, and she's asking me why. So,
you don't do what?
whoa! I'll tell you right now.
Yeah.
First of all, I have no idea.
Right.
Secondly, it's not the time to ask that question. Because time might not ever even reveal that until you get to the end. And so, but through the weeks and the months and even the several years, I kept telling her, because what she became obsessed with finding the why. Or trying to find Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. Oh, I see why this happened, because this person got saved out of it. I said, hey, what is that? I said, I know that you're trying so hard to find why. I said, that's a bankrupt mission.
Yeah.
I said, because if you come off, and let's say you come through and you say, the reason my son Ryan had to die was because John was going to get saved. I said, what does that say about God? That God couldn't save John unless he killed your son?
Right.
I said, don't go there. I know what you're trying to do, but in one hand, you're giving God a backhanded slap. Because God doesn't need any of that. Now, God might have used that, but that doesn't mean that's the why. I said, you might not ever know the why. Just let the why go until eternity. And I said, until you do, you're going to constantly be vexed. And so through the years, eventually she said, you know what? I'm at peace. It doesn't mean it takes the pain away, or the frustration, or the hurt. But she said, I don't need to know anymore. I've given that up.
Yep.
And I'm just... Ultimately, what this comes back to for all of us is faith. Faith is the evidence of things what? We walk by faith, not by sight. See, so when we come to these things, we say, I don't know. I'm just trusting God.
Yeah. God does not do why.
No. At least not yet. Maybe eventually he will, but and we're not here yet.
In her case, she had a foundation in Christ.
She did.
In the why question that you get from somebody who's a non-believer, I kind of tend, as that being a crossroad, like Bob is talking to. If you're not there, that was the crossroad. That they'll go, you can walk away and feel pretty good that you told them that you're on the opposite side. You're like Wormwood. I got that.
Yep. Ultimately, what brings somebody in that position, we're coming to the place of saying, hey. For you, if you're wondering, or you can't become a Christian because this evil happened, and you don't have you want answers. You basically, the unbeliever many times follows the path of Job in demanding answers, and I will not unless I get an answer. God says, okay. You know what? I'm God here. You're not. And I'll tell you what I am going to give, what I'm not going to give. Can you accept that? No? That's your choice. Ultimately, what we do is we try to bring him to a place of faith, trust, in saying, faith is not seeing all the time. Faith is trusting in what you don't see.
Almost similar to asking for a sign.
It is.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll believe if I have a sign, right? if God tells me. So here, what is unfortunate is that sometimes in the Christian church, and I've seen it, I mean, that we try our best to defend God's honor and His integrity. But by doing that, we say God would never do that. God would never bring that to be in your life. God would never even allow that, but I don't want to say how that theology is bankrupt. Or, for example, in the book of Job, when I've seen the prosperity teachers in this sense, they'll say, well, the reason that this happened to Job is because if you look at Job, I think it's in Job chapter 3, Job mentions, the thing that I feared has come upon me. Fear is the opposite of faith. Therefore, God had to do this because Job was not a man of faith. Which is a complete bunch of bunk. Because in the chapter 1, God says, Job did not sin with his lips.
Right.
So he had, but see, again, what's their motive? Their motive is try to rescue God, that God could not do that unless there was a reason, and fear was the reason. But yet in Job 1, God says to Satan, you have caused me, this is God speaking, you have caused me to reach out against Job without cause. Without cause.
Part of that fear is like, we've had people say, I have no idea what you're going through. I go, you're right. You have no idea.
Yep.
And you don't want to know. Don't even think about it until it happens. You don't want to know. It's a fear of, what am I actually going to do? How am I going to handle that?
Yeah.
If that was to take place. If you were in a flood or a hurricane and you lost your house, how am I going to deal with losing my possessions, or whatever? How am I going to deal with it if I lose a leg? And there's lots of different fears. You just don't want to go there. We're children of God. He loves us. He paid a dear price for us. Why would He hurt us without a purpose?
Without a good purpose at the end, whatever that looks like.
Without a benefit to us.
Yep.
On that same line,
I think a lot of times, adversity it destroys superficial faith, but it strengthens the real faith. And a lot of people, I think this whole thing with Job is, a lot of people only trust God, when everything is going well. And in this case, everything is not going well.
The book of Job is about real faith. And Job his faith was certainly challenged, and it took a nosedive, but it didn't become non-existent.
Right.
He didn't say, I've become an atheist now, I don't believe in God anymore, I don't, trust Him. He went to the path, according to Job 32 verse 1, Elihu says, you become self-righteous in demanding an answer, and Job failed there. So, but he never lost this, and you saw his faith go like this in the book. What, Jerry, what are you going to say?
well, I'm just going to say, it was the Lord that brought Job to Satan. Because He said, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He's blameless, upright,
Job,
a man who fears God and shuns evil. So
he didn't have the benefit of seeing that. Later, Job would have been like, why'd you bring me up?
Yeah.
Leave me out of your little conversation.
Thanks for the shout out.
Yeah, I don't need your shout out, for sure. All right, let's keep moving here. He says, this blockade in 6b there is God's protection. Nothing can happen to us outside of God's permissive will. How does the war have certain tendencies? We can talk about that. Here, question 7. Paragraph 2, explain the thinking of Screwtape in wishing all humans die in costly nursing homes. Discuss the suggestion that every sickness excuses every indulgence. So at the end he says this, at the end of paragraph 2, how much better for us if all humans died in costly nursing homes amid doctors who lie, nurses who lie, friends who lie, as we have trained them, promising life to the dying. Encouraging the... Okay, we'll move on. We'll hold that for a second. Why would Screwtape want all humans to die in costly nursing homes amidst the people lying to them.
It's the opposite of the foxhole.
It's the opposite of the foxhole.
It's unprepared.
It's a great answer.
It's
What's that?
unprepared. It's unprepared.
Yes. It causes them to be unprepared, not to think about mortality or eternal issues, right? And do we see
Clinging on to life,
clinging on to life? Yeah.
the worldly life.
Does this happen?
Well, they're given a false hope.
It's a false
It's a
hope.
false hope.
Because you know what? God raised Lazarus from the dead, right?
Yep.
But he still died.
Yep.
Okay. It's a great miracle. But however many years later, he still died. So God has not promised us immortality in this body. The wages of sin is what?
Death.
Death. So we're going to die, and even a believer that dies is still... How does a believer dying glorify God?
Good attitude, a lot of faith.
Well, okay, I asked it wrong. Okay,
Rephrase.
yes, I'll rephrase. Because you're giving the spiritual answer, which is good. When a believer dies, it says God is just. Right?
Yeah.
Why? Because the payment of sin is death.
Yeah.
And God didn't rescue us from, maybe the one generation when the rapture happens will, but He didn't rescue His children from going the path of all mankind, which is death.
Right.
When an
Because
unbeliever
we're all
dies,
sinners.
we're all
We're
sinners.
all sinners. We gotta
And
die.
when a believer dies, as an
Yeah.
unbeliever dies,
Sin dies.
God says, holiness. The
Yeah.
angels say, well, just and true are your righteous judgments, O Lord. Now, in the midst of that, as Bob said, we can certainly approach it, Lord willing, with an attitude of faith and trust, going, hey, this isn't the end. This is actually great. The sooner the better.
That's the beginning.
True.
Amen.
Paul said that in Philippians 1. And I desire to depart and be with Christ. To die is what? Gain, which is far better, far better. But it's better for me to stick around here. I got some things I can help you with, whatever.
If you want to practice that attitude, every time you go through thorns and thistles in life,
Yeah.
which is promised to you,
Yeah.
give God glory, because that should build your faith.
Yeah.
Because Christ didn't die for the thorns and thistles. This is still the curse of existence. So you can practice that good attitude all the way up to your grave and be an expert on it.
Yeah.
See, what happens, I think back, most of us have been believers for a while, but I want you to think back to you coming to salvation, and then maybe you're in the midst of suffering, I don't know, but nevertheless, you come to salvation, you get this new relationship with God, and then you kind of get your first dose of suffering of some kind. And you go, whoa, where's God at here? But what does that betray? It betrays a false thinking that if God was in my life, this wouldn't happen.
Bad things wouldn't happen.
Bad things wouldn't happen. That belief is from the pit of hell. It promises life in the midst of a fallen world. They're lying, saying, well, even there, if you believe in God, God rescues you, He gets you a Lexus, He pays off your debt, you get the new house, you get all these other things, no suffering. You live under God's divine prosperity. That is straight from the pit of Satan. Because that's not what we experience in this world. And therefore, when something bad happens to you, you question God. You say, well, God's not being faithful. But actually, you're trusting in a false promise. That's why proper theology is super important. Or secondly, these cowardly teachers say, well, you just don't have enough faith. And we love to smack them around. In Jesus' name. In Jesus' name.
Don't you think that repeated, more deeper suffering will bring more righteousness?
It can, for
And
sure.
so, for example, He would let deeper things happen like He happened to Job, so that we could have even
Well,
more righteousness.
When you look at Hebrews 11, you look at, and as we read, you have different levels of God's prophets. And that's why we read the other one. God sent them prophets, they killed them, whatever, they persecuted them. And Jesus, being the ultimate prophet, suffered the ultimate penalty, the ultimate, insult, so to speak. And so, as we step back, for us, I'm glad that C.S. Lewis brings this topic up right here in the beginning of the experience. And I think it's interesting. Again, I'm still not I'm still not brave enough to say, Lord, I want to be one of your favorites. Call me a sissy, that's fine, because it's probably true. Because if I want to be one of its favorites, okay, hold on 1 second. Remember when the disciples asked Jesus, put me on the left or on the right?
Yeah.
And he says, well, are you willing to be baptized with the baptism that I'm going to have? And they said, oh yeah, we can do it. He says, well, you will. Because all of them gave their lives. But they didn't know what they were asking for. They wanted to be the favorite, but the favorite came with the price. What were you saying?
So like, I think a big motivator for a lot of, like, for me would be like guilt.
Okay.
Guilt would make me want to be a martyr.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I think that, like, when you say, I wouldn't want to ask, like, I know it sounds weird, but I would want to be a martyr. Just because, like, I don't know, I really believe that building my life on what's eternal is the only thing that really matters.
Yeah.
And so, if I died, or whatever, I mean, honestly, I think it would be painless, no matter how painful it was. So it's like, I don't really know.
Well, part of it too is, I think, going out in a blaze of glory could be, I mean, if it was as easy as putting a bullet in your head, and again, it was painless.
But being sodded too.
But being sodded too,
But that's sinful, thinking that you've got control of your life. You can rely
Yeah,
on
it's
God.
true.
It's God's choice when to do
Yeah.
it.
It's not about going directly from death
to glory, right?
glory.
The harder thing, but Paul makes this comment in 1 Corinthians 10, which is very fascinating. He says, he dies daily. That's much harder to die every day than to go out in a blaze of glory, isn't it?
Yes.
Because you die to yourself every day.
And what you
Is that, like, considered repentance, kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. That's hard. I mean, to say, all right, Lord, I'm going to give it all to you. And Jesus says, you know what, just live every day for me. That's easier, okay? Because that's going out,
Yep.
you know, whatever.
Yep.
But to do it in the grind, Bob?
Just referring back to the conversation I had yesterday, Taylor mentioning guilt triggered basically this dying to yourself every day. This idea that I took a moment to tell this guy how I didn't understand truly what he's going through. As a matter of fact, I was on the way to go stand up paddleboarding with my wife. You know, and so there's a certain guilt of like, dude, I can't get in your shoes. But I think God calls us to be faithful. Even though we can't experience everything,
Cannot. Nope.
we have to speak up. And I just told this guy, man, I'm on the way to go and enjoy myself, and I'm sorry you're like this and in this situation. But and we did help him a bit, and Jennifer stayed with him a little longer. And so the point is, it's like our guilt can immobilize us to step out in faith and do stuff. So God's covered that guilt, brother. It's gone.
Yeah.
Step out in love. And
I kind of embrace guilt because
It
I
can be
deserve
motivating,
it.
Sure.
I think we all do, and I think it's something you have to
Took
come
away
to
our
terms
guilt and
with.
shame.
But then also, yeah, be careful because Screwtape would say, yes, you do. And then all of a sudden you have a
Well,
martyr mentality.
But
But
then
it's
you get
like-
wallowing in guilt.
Yeah, then you
That's
wallow
the
in it.
opposite one.
yeah.
Well,
Or-
no, that's not what I
That's work.
mean.
Yeah, I know.
I
It's
mean,
just be
like,
careful.
it's like me being humble before God. Like, what good have I ever done? You know, in your name. If I could martyr myself, that would be the only good I've ever done.
Yeah.
Because of his love, because of your love.
Yes.
You understand truly what God has done for you.
Exactly. I mean, like, who am I to have been like, I was an atheist, I would like blasphemed. I would say you guys were infantile 2 years ago, and you guys were all idiots. But you know, like, who am I to be woken up the way I've been woken up? And it's like,
Nobody.
do I deserve it? Like, I don't know if I don't deserve it. So it's like, what can I do to thank
grateful?
to thank
Yeah,
God?
Nobody deserves
That's the key.
grace.
Die to yourself.
Grateful, he's so grateful.
You got to be careful
Serve-
with guilt
serve
because
him
guilt
what
can
he's
put the
given
brake
you.
on your witness, on your outreach.
You have to
If
be
you wallow
able
in
to
the guilt.
minister
As
out.
we've been
It
talking
gives
about,
me the ability to
everything-
forgive, though, too.
Everything
Yeah.
in balance, right? Everything in
Yes.
balance.
You
Is,
know?
you have those that you know, again, have the martyr mentality. All the
Serve
time.
him what
woe
he's
is
given
me.
you.
Yeah.
Well, this world passeth away.
Yep. That's the
So-
proper perspective.
Yeah.
And Satan always has a way to say, okay, I'll take that bet. Let's challenge that. Let's keep moving here. So he says, we're promising life to the dying. And then he mentions this in paragraph 2, encouraging the belief that sickness excuses every indulgence. What does that mean? Sickness excuses every indulgence.
Oh, woe is me.
My back hurts, so I'm gonna take a pain pill.
Do whatever it takes to take care of it. You know,
Okay.
I'll be
I
allowed to
deserve-
drink because drink myself silly,
I worked
Well,
hard today. I'm gonna
not
get
feel
drunk.
suffering.
Let's put it in context. The person that's sick maybe has a terminal illness. Put it in context. The person who's terminal will be like, well, I'm going to die anyway. I might as well go get wasted and live it up. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the sickness excuses all these
Yeah.
indulgences to say, well, and that's what they would encourage. They would, to me, back when I was in high school, several people got these tattoos, YOLO, Y-O-L-O. What does it mean?
You only live once.
You only live once.
Stupid.
So they use that as an entitlement. Well, you only live once, so get the most out of it. I said, you only live once, you better get it right.
Well, it's the same as
You only better
Aleister
get it
Crowley.
right.
That's the same as Aleister Crowley's "Do as Thou Wilt."
Exactly. So
Same
here,
thing, just for us in this day and
Yep.
age.
I don't want to spend too much on that, but he says, encouraging the belief that sickness excuses every indulgence, and even if our workers know their job, withholding all suggestion of a priest, lest it should betray to the sick man his true condition. So not only do they lie and tell him, you're going to live forever, but hey, you have cancer, go ahead and go get another woman or another man and live it up or get wasted or whatever. But he says, and how disastrous for us is the continual remembrance of death, which war enforces. Remember, that's the continual remembrance of death is bad for Screwtape because it reminds him of their mortality. One of our best weapons, contented worldliness, is rendered useless. In wartime, not even a human can believe that he's going to live forever. One of their best weapons, contented worldliness. What does that mean?
They're just concerned with material things
Okay.
and their ordinary life. They just kind of live in the moment.
Go to the celebrity golf tournament.
What's that?
You have a comfort heart idol.
Yep. Eat, drink, and be merry, right? This is great. Life is wonderful. I'm content. I'm worldly, but yeah, I'm living the dream. I'm having fun. You think about contented worldliness. Life's going well. The opposite of that would be homelessness, being in a war. Maybe your house got destroyed. All the things that at war is the opposite of this because it shocks you out of that contented worldliness where you don't have to think about eternal issues.
But you have to rely on God every day
Yes.
for food, shelter.
You know another word for this? One of their best weapons? Worldly comfort.
What's the verse that says, "O ye simple ones, for how long will you love simplicity"?
I know the verse. I don't know the address.
I need to figure that out. That's a great one.
Yeah. And you think about that. Okay, and I'm guilty because we're all human, is that worldly comfort. And yet, I said this the other day or a few weeks ago, in that when you go to a prayer meeting, oftentimes what are we praying for?
Ourselves.
Creaturely comforts.
Yeah.
Which is exactly this. And that is one of Satan's best weapons. Think about that. What we're praying for is that one thing that will hurt us. Isn't that amazing? How has that crept in? Now, again, I'm guilty because if I'm in pain, I pray for my pain to go away. If I'm having difficulty, I pray for my difficulty to be removed. But yet, we come and I would say, that's non-scientific, just you tell me, my own experiment or, statistical analysis is probably 70% of most prayers are for creaturely comforts, either for me or for somebody else. Well, can you pray for my aunt because she's going through this difficulty? And what do you want? Well, I'd like her to be comfortable. I'd like that to be removed. I'd like the disease to be gone. And instead, we're not being super spiritual here, but we're being real. How about pray that she grows?
Yeah, she learns her lesson
She learns.
through that. Something that
I remember the last time I was teaching through this was like 2009, or when I first taught through it. And I don't know if I told you guys that I was weightlifting and I somehow got injured, and so I still have 3 herniated discs in my neck. And I was on the floor writhing in pain, and I'd be up to preach, and I'd be like this. And it took months and months. I was like this for probably about 8 months. And people were like, well, we'll pray for you. I said, no! Don't pray for the comfort.
Sounds like you are.
Pray that God will teach me what He wants me to learn in the midst of this. Do not pray for my comfort, because somehow God's trying to teach me something here. And it took a while, and the best thing was when I'd go up and preach, the pain would go away. So I preached long, okay? But as soon as I came off, I couldn't move. It was horrible. And my neck is still that way. If I go to the MRI, it's still the same. The only thing I'm missing right now is pain. But I still lack all the movement. My arms, still atrophied. My muscles are gone. But creaturely comforts. And it's the same thing. He says, best weapons, when difficulty comes, one of their best weapons, creaturely comfort, is rendered useless. Pain has a way, and we see this in Job. It says, they hear God in their affliction. Elihu says this in the book of Job, that through their affliction they hear. God brings them to see.
I was just going to say, when you said for them not to pray for you, and that you were preaching and you would preach long because the pain's gone.
Yes.
If I had the opposite effect, I'd pray for God to continue that pain.
Maybe.
And there's another thing too. Oh gosh. I've always said my best times in life are when I'm speaking about the Lord, and because at that time, like you don't feel anything because you're so concentrated on God when you're talking to somebody else about Him.
It comes to the background, but pain is real. And I imagine, because of my neck, when I and I have stenosis, just the narrowing, and so when I get to be older,
it's going to get you.
I'm not looking forward to that.
So preach a
I
little.
have a herniated disc in my lower back, and it happened when I was 16, and I am in pain like every day.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's keep moving here. Last paragraph, paragraph 3. He says, I know that scab tree, which is another wormwood, and others have seen in wars a great opportunity for attacks on faith, but I think that view is exaggerated. I think Screwtape has great theology here. He's seasoned. He knows these younger fiends, so to speak, getting excited about pain and war. He says, don't you know that draws them? The enemy's human partisans have all been plainly told by him that suffering is an essential part of what he calls redemption. Now, let's see, question 9. The enemy's partisans have all been plainly told. Compare Philippians 1:29, Acts 5:41, and ask yourself whether this is something that you have accepted and are seeing the Lord in understanding of Him. One of the questions I think, let's see, that I have here is, how plainly has it been told? And Philippians 1:29, I'll just go through them.
I can read it.
Yeah, go ahead.
For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in Him, but also to suffer for Him.
Okay. It has been given to you as a gift, granted, not just to believe, faith is a gift, but also to suffer. Well, we want part A and not part B. Oh, I would love to be given the gift to believe, but the suffering part, Acts 5:41, it says they went on to rejoice that they were counted worthy to suffer. Acts 14, Paul says that we must, through many tribulations, enter the kingdom. So you see this pattern. James 1:2, count it all joy, brother, when you fall into various trials. 1 Peter 4, same thing, when you suffer according to the will of God. So 1 Thessalonians says the same thing. It has been appointed, suffering has been appointed. It is crystal clear in Scripture if we're willing to receive it. The problem is oftentimes we just don't like it.
And if we count it as glory to God, then it makes it a little easier.
The Bible says to give thanks. Does it say to give thanks for all things? No, give thanks in. You know? Give thanks in.
Yeah.
So here in the same, when James is writing us to take joy, brother, it's not to take joy in the midst of the suffering, but in the result. Because he says your patience, it'll produce patience and perseverance and blessed, goes on and on. Okay, so let's keep going here. We have been plainly told that suffering, even though there's a lot of bad theology out there, is an essential part of what he calls redemption. So that a faith which is destroyed by a war or a pestilence or a tribulation or a hard time or a difficulty cannot really have been worth the trouble of destroying. The question for us is, do we have a strong enough faith that Satan would even look at us and say, I want to see that guy go down. I want to see that woman lose her faith, because that's a strong one. And when you have the book of Job, God says, hey, here's a faith that's worth you trying to get rid of. His name's Job. Have you seen my servant Job? None like him in all the earth. Would or could God say that about us? I hope so. But we got to be careful, even though Job didn't know. But faith, true faith that is a gift given by God, can never be fully and finally destroyed, because it's a gift by God and it can never be lost. However, it can grow weak, as we see. It can grow self-righteous. It can grow confused.
It can be attacked immediately after you receive the Lord, then you spend the next 10 years in sin.
Yep, absolutely. It ebbs and flows. And we don't know how long Job lasted. Was it 5 years, that whole cycle, that 3 cycles of exchange with the friends? We don't know. He says, I am speaking now of diffused suffering over a long period, such as the war will produce. What he's saying there is this idea. What's the word attrition mean? Does he use this? What's the word attrition? I'm just asking, it's not on here.
Wear something outright
to wear something down slowly. So maybe Screwtape is recognizing that sometimes the best weapon for them is not just some big, gigantic evil that comes in your life, but let's wear them down with the sickness that lasts 10 years, a pain that lasts 20. Let's wear them down slow, and we'll see if that faith stays.
I have nightmares.
Okay.
I have consistent nightmares, like every Saturday night. I wake up from a nightmare, sweating. I don't know what it is, but it's all like really dark and like demonic seeming. And but it's cool at the same time, because I'll say, like, in the dream I'll end it by saying, like, it'll end by me acknowledging Jesus.
Yeah.
And it ends like that, like instantly.
And who knows? I mean, that's could be part of training for maybe some future occult ministry or something. Who knows that you're getting in that training? I mean,
who knows?
Who knows?
Like, it really is kind of scary but cool.
Scary and cool.
Yeah.
And I guess we can all say that suffering, that's a good way to say it, suffering can be scary but cool at the same time.
No, test it out though. Say Jesus' name in a nightmare and it'll end instantly.
You see a lot of examples of that.
Yeah.
He says, so this diffuse suffering over long periods such as the war, of course at the precise moment of terror, bereavement, or physical pain, you may catch your man when his reason is temporarily suspended. But even then, if he applies to enemy headquarters, I have found that the post is nearly always defended. So, what's the key word in that sentence? Of course, the precise moment of blank, blank, blank. What is suspended?
Reason.
Reason. Why is that the key word there?
Because if we just go by feelings, they lead us astray.
We've been learning over and over and over throughout all of the letters, well, 5 so far, and we'll see this, is that faith is based on truth, which is reason, and the opposite of faith really is feeling. And certainly, at the moment of bereavement, loss, or terror, our reason goes out the window because we're overcome by grief, or pain, or suffering, or anger even. So he's saying, hey, let's call it what it is. The emotion is getting the best of them. And it's causing them to maybe they're doubting God. Maybe they're questioning God's goodness. Maybe they're questioning whether God is even there. He said, look, we know that. Of course, at that moment, his reason is temporarily suspended. But if we seek God, that post is always defended.
Yeah.
God always comes and says, hold on, work through. Does God tell us not to have grief? No.
No.
But, for example, 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul's writing about the rapture. He says there's those that grieve without any hope.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's terrible.
Yes.
But we, if so-and-so goes along before us, we say, you know what, we grieve, but man, we have hope we're going to see him again. So we have faith, which is truth. We have that mixed with grief all at the same time. But the goal in all of this is that our reason, that our trust and our faith in the truth and the promises of God get back into supremacy over the feelings as quick as possible.
I think it's an excellent point, the reason part of it, because God is a God of reason and order, and part of what we're seeing is the deception of people's mind right now. People are being deluded with a great delusion, and they're losing their reason, which means they're appealing to emotion and it's causing lawlessness.
Yeah.
And you look out at our current polarization, you know, in our country. Whether it's going to stay or not, I doubt. It's probably going to get worse and worse. But when you see a lot of the arguments, they're not arguments. They're meant to bring up emotion, right?
Yes.
They're meant to evoke and to... Yeah, they're not saying, hey, let's reason together, right? Isaiah 1:18. Let's reason.
Hear me out.
It's meant to get emotions worked up, anger, they show pictures, even if they're false, of people in cages, and yet there's no truth behind it. Oh, wait, that was a previous administration. Whoops. But they go to do that in order to evoke, and they try to get reason out of the way.
Well,
that is Satan's
I think we
biggest
should be
method.
really worried when everything's unified. That's when we should be really, really worried.
Jesus said that. What was it when everybody speaks well of you?
You know, and as far as the unification
verse.
of the church goes, that's going to be really dangerous because that's when we'll see the Antichrist, I believe.
Jesus, the perfect man, was hated without a cause. So that's why he said, what was it when everybody speaks well of you? You're not.
Have you ever heard the Jesuit oath?
Go ahead.
Well, I won't get it exactly right, but it says like they pledge to openly and secretively go against any Protestant form of a church and anything that goes against the Catholicism, which is not Christianity in any way, shape, or form. And basically we have a Jesuit Pope right now.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, and he preaches love and acceptance and tolerance. Those are good things, but it's like once we're all unified, like that's the whole goal, unify everybody under one religion, one government.
And under those very positive feelings, you know.
Your feelings,
Yeah.
exactly.
Leonard, what were you saying? You got something, Leonard?
No, I was just,
Jerry.
yeah, it's, the reason is not there.
The reason's out.
Yeah, and
Sure.
it's so sad for the.
What I caught at the last paragraph there, it says, if he applies to the enemy headquarters, it tells us what we have to do
Yeah.
in that situation. We go to him
Go to
in
the
prayer,
throne.
in meditation.
It's you know, if you want a good,
On not the worldly, but the eternal world.
if you want a good verse or psalm for the week on that is Psalm 73, where Asaph is looking out and he sees all the wicked being rewarded, and he says, "My foot almost slipped."
Yeah.
But he said, "But then I turned my heart to the temple."
Yes.
And God reminded him of the truth that no, he's going to get it. They're going to, all wrongs will be righted. But it's so interesting that there he was. His reason had left temporarily until he turned his heart to the temple, back to the truth of God. Anyways, all right. Well, let's pray, shall we? Father, what great stuff, and we ask that you would strengthen our faith. And here we are. We're talking in these things in abstract or theoretical ways. Certainly, Lord, this can be applied immediately in concrete ways in our life. Help us to continue to turn our hearts towards enemy headquarters, which is your headquarters. That you will continually help us see the truth, and again, that truth that strengthens our faith. We ask for your Spirit to continue to strengthen us and to fill us so that we can respond to the difficulties of life in a way that's positive. And also, not just ourselves, but that when we see others, that we can come alongside in compassion, allowing those times of grief and not just throwing scripture at them, but truly in a spirit of grace, knowing that, hey, it's a process. It's a process. And we just pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.